You are welcome back to class. And in this lesson, we shall be looking at the empiricism of Scrum. In the previous lesson, of course, this is still the first module, Scrum, the framework. In the previous lesson, we looked at the overview of how Scrum works. So this lesson would narrow down to the empiricism of Scrum. What do we mean by the empiricism of Scrum? Empiricism of Scrum refers to the pillars of Scrum. That is exactly what it says. When we say empiricism of Scrum, it talks about the fundamental concepts upon which Scrum framework is laid. They are the pillars in Scrum. And there are just 3 of them. This lesson would be a short lesson. And the 3 of them are transparency, inspection, and adaptation. Transparency, inspection, and adaptation. So when we say the empiricism of Scrum is a fundamental concept that underpins the Scrum framework for agile project management. Empiricism in Scrum is based on the principles of transparency, inspection, and adaptation. It emphasizes the importance of using empirical data and feedback to make decisions and continuously improve processes. So these pillars in Scrum focuses on empirical data and feedback as tools needed to make decisive decisions, progressive decisions, and continuously improve the process. That is what the empiricism of Scrum essentially is all about. And of course, the first one is transparency, which refers to the practice of making all aspects of the work visible to the Scrum team, the stakeholders, and anyone involved in the project. So with transparency, work becomes visible. There is nothing hidden in Scrum. There are no bottlenecks. Anytime there are bottlenecks, it becomes visible quickly, and strength is deployed to resolve such bottlenecks. That is how Scrum works. This includes sharing information about the work being done, discussions on the progress, flagging obstacles, and unveiling risk early so that solutions could be made where applicable. Transparency allows everyone to have a common understanding on the current state of the project, which is essential for effective collaboration. That is exactly what transparency focuses on. The progress and outcome must be visible to all. Scrum is big on visibility of the status of work per time. Nothing is hidden under Scrum. Then the second one, inspection. Inspection involves regularly and systematically examining the progress and results of the work being done. Inspection, we regularly and systematically examine the progress of work. And of course, this is done through various events and meetings, such as the daily stand-up, the sprint review, the sprint retrospective. In latter classes, we would unveil about all these events and we'll dive deep down into them. But at this level, just know that inspection is carried out through some of these ways. And it is focused on revealing everything that needs to be done. In Scrum, we continuously check and assess the progress of work towards the goal. There is always a goal. The goal in this case is what the stakeholder wants. Please note that the goal is what the stakeholder wants. So the development process is towards delivering exactly what the stakeholder wants, and that is how Scrum is designed. And the third one is adaptation. Adaptation works with inspection. Really, the three of them work together. Where there is transparency is where you can inspect closely. When you inspect closely, you find some other things that you want to bring improvement on. So adaptation, once something has been inspected and deviations or issues have been identified, the Scrum team must adapt to address them. So in essence, in Scrum, remember in our first class, I mentioned that Scrum teams are autonomous teams. They are teams that could make decisions on their own. They have cross-functional members, cross-functional team, meaning they have all the skill set needed. So whenever something is identified that needs to be improved or that needs to be worked on or adjusted, the team is enabled to carry out that adjustment themselves. Of course, they would need, from time to time, they could need support from outside, but that team is empowered to carry out that adjustment themselves. Adaptation involves making changes based on the inspection results. I made mention of that earlier, that both inspection and adaptation, they go hand in hand, and of course, transparency, inspection, and adaptation, they all work together. So this could mean adapting to product backlog, changing the way work is done, or modifying the project plan. So let's take, for instance, through inspection, you realize that what is being developed slightly deviates from what the stakeholder wants. Or in another meeting, like the sprint review meeting, you realized that the stakeholder gave some feedback that some other things, some other information or requirements given ab initio were not implemented as wanted. What do? You take that feedback back into the product backlog. Remember, in first lesson, I mentioned that the product backlog is the work item, the list of items to be worked on that would deliver the product. So when there are changes, the team takes the feedback and adjusts it in the product backlog, which is the list of work that needs to be done, so that is carried out effectively. The key to continuously optimize and adapt to improvement is to ensure that the outcome is what the stakeholders want. Scrum is big on customer centricity. Customer centricity is when you focus squarely on what the end users want. The end users actually dictate the direction of that project. So the empirical process control in Scrum follows an iterative and incremental approach where small units of work are completed, inspected, and adapted in short cycle. I mentioned earlier in the previous classes that everything Scrum has to do with iterative delivery, incremental approach, where work is designed, is planned for, is worked on in smaller bits until all the whole bunch is delivered fully. So the empiricism of Scrum talks about the pillars as transparency, inspection, and adaptation. We would see in latter classes how the empiricism of Scrum would come to play in everything Scrum does. We will see that from the product backlog, from the visibility of the product backlog, and the transparency that makes everyone to know the progress of work per time. We will see how Scrum inspects and adapts towards the sprint goal. So please don't forget the empiricism of Scrum is quite important. These three form the foundation upon which Scrum is built on. In the next lesson, we shall then talk about the values of Scrum, which we would be able to harmonize. We're laying the foundations and building the blocks so that we could have a rounded picture of what Scrum is. If you have any question, please send them across to me. I'll be glad to have some time so that we can relate on them and break them down into smaller bits. Thank you. See you in the next class.